Well, Kevin Hyland is the UK's Anti-Slavery Commissioner. His role is to lead efforts to tackle modern slavery and human trafficking. He's advised Australian officials on a modern slavery act here. I spoke to him earlier from London. Commissioner Hyland, thank you so much for joining us. It almost seems strange to be talking about something like slavery in 2018. I suppose in the public's mind they associate it with something from long, long ago, but it is so prevalent still in our world today, isn't it?
Well, it's shocking to think that in 2018 there are estimated to be 40 million people in modern day slavery around the world. And if you look back to the transatlantic slave trade, which spanned over 200 years, it was estimated through that whole period that there was 12 million people in slavery. So it's shocking that in the modern world we have this where people are being traded as a commodity, across the globe. So it affects every part of the world.
And of course that it's happening in countries like yours and mine. I read one statistic that said that human trafficking or slavery has increased by more than 300-fold in the UK alone.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the United Kingdom, we now identify this and can see it, and we're accepting it's here. So I think, it's not perhaps that it's not been there all the time. It's now that we're recognising it and we're putting in measures to support victims, encouraging them to come forward and then actually pursuing those who commit these crimes. But, there's still so much more to be done. This needs to be a global fight because criminals, as you say, are operating across the globe, in Australia, in Europe, in the United Kingdom. And, we need to have efforts from across the world to actually target this because whilst there are 40 million in slavery, there are very few prosecutions. And we need to make this a crime where it isn't a crime where impunity reigns.
I want to look at how law enforcement may be able to work together in just a moment. But first, I really want to try to get some definitions around what constitutes slavery now. When we use that word, what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about people who have their freedom taken in some form. And they are then moved or they are kept somewhere and they are exploited. And it can be many ways. It can be exploited for sexual exploitation. It could be for forced labour. It could be for domestic servitude. It could be for forced criminality, which is something we're really unravelling here in the UK and seeing more of. So it can be many ways that people are used as a commodity. But if you look at it, why is it done? And it is done so criminals can make money. So that's where it does link back to the traditional term of slavery, that people in those days were exploited to reduce or eliminate the cost of labour. And that's what's happening now. People are used for their working ability, no matter what that work is, and then criminals make money out of them. But their freedom is taken, and it can be in many ways. It could be through force, taking documents. It could be threats to families. It could be through debt bondage. So it's very complex. But at the heart of it is taking someone's freedom.
When we talk about criminal activity as well, are we talking about organised gangs here, if you like, organised slavery? And if so, how does that operate?
So we see it in different forms. We see it where it's one-to-one, where somebody may keep somebody in domestic servitude, so ever somebody who is a household slave. But then we do see gangs that may operate across different countries who trade in people and may run different organised businesses where they may sell people for working in agriculture or construction or sexual exploitation. And then we see people who are actually in the legitimate economies, so people who are working in industries where they're producing things that end up in our high streets. And, the Global Slavery Index, which was actually produced from Walk Free in Australia, estimated that 16 million people are exploited in that way. So there's a part to play, not just a criminal justice response, but communities and the private sector. If we really want to address this, we need to get multiple actors fighting this together, but also globally. So it's, as I say, very complex, but there are some real big opportunities to tackle this if we start working together.
It's fascinating what you say about the types of industries and activities that people are being forced into, and obviously prostitution comes to mind, but you're also talking there about the types of work that we may take for granted that may be happening right in front of us. I was reading about people who were put into slavery to work in car wash, for instance, or in nail salons. I mean, these are industries that are servicing us as a community and may be happening directly in front of us.
Yeah, and in the United Kingdom, the car washes and the nail bars are things I've really raised as a priority. If we take car washes, you know, there's thousands of them across the United Kingdom, and you've only got to look at the conditions that people are working in, and you realise they must be exploitative. And if, as here in the United Kingdom, you're paying £4 or £5 to have 6 people washing your car, there's something wrong. You just need to add it up and see it's there in front of you. So they need to be addressed. But then if we look at other industries like construction, you know, I've been working here in the UK with our Chartered Institute of Builders so that we can actually make sure that the standards of employment in the workplace for construction workers, not just here in the UK but internationally, respect those people, that people should get paid properly, should live and work in decent conditions. You know, work should bring dignity, not slavery.
How much of the increase in slavery that we are seeing is due to the mass movement of people now? We know that we are dealing with refugee crises across the world. We see that coming out of the Middle East. We're seeing it in Myanmar at the moment with the movement of the Rohingya people. How vulnerable are the refugees for being exploited in this way?
Well, people who are on the move, and it's estimated there are over 65 million displaced people across the world at the moment, they are a target for would-be traffickers to go and exploit. And when I've gone to southern Italy and Greece and looked at the issues across, you know, those travelling through North Africa, you know, we see that people, for example, in Libya are being kept in houses where they'll be exploited, where they'll be traded on the street. And I met one girl, for example, when I was in southern Italy, where she had been spent 3 months in a house being raped daily. She was 15 years of age, being raped daily while criminals made money off her so that she could earn enough money to travel across the Mediterranean. Now, that is happening on a daily basis. So these people who are vulnerable on the move really are targeted by criminals to exploit them. And that's why I'm very much pushing that we deal with issues in countries. We need to go to the root causes. How do we use development in countries like Nigeria, in Uganda, in Eritrea and Ethiopia to actually take away the power of the traffickers and the exploiters?
You've led me to the next question, really. I wanted to look at what Australia may be doing. Australia is now looking at draft laws in a modern slavery act, and you've been involved in that. What advice would you be giving Australia? What recommendations would you be giving that Australia should look to as a model, perhaps even the UK, that you're so heavily involved in, as a model for drafting this type of legislation?
Well, when I came to Australia, I met, you know, government officials, I met with your law enforcement and civil society, and there are a number of efforts going on in Australia at the moment. But the legislation you're looking at includes supply chain transparency, which I saw as one of the key elements, because actually to get the private sector involved, and as you have in Australia, engagement with the Bali process and looking what can be done in the entire ASEAN region is key, working collaboratively. But one of the things you really have looked at is how you can make your supply chain transparency rules perhaps advanced of ours by having a list so you can see which companies do need to comply and who is complying, and then what action you can take if they're not. So I think learning from us, and there were other things that were suggested about, you know, making it an offence to take someone's passport from them, because then, you know, you've got somebody at the very early stages before the exploitation happens. So, you know, you've looked at our legislation, you've got good legislation already about the crimes and the criminal justice approach, but it's that more advanced thing, and also how we can collaborate. There's great partnerships, say, for example, between Nigeria and the UK now, and pursuing organised criminal crime groups. So that's what we need to see, more of that, more of the kind of we're going to deal with this as a global community. We've got it at the UN, we've got an SDG focusing on this. Our Prime Minister heads up a call to action, and Australia is partner to that. We see your ministers and your Prime Minister speaking about this. Well, the will is there, but now we need to turn that into action, which actually protects individuals, gives them good work, and actually makes this a crime that doesn't pay.
Indeed, and given what you've outlined there, how complex this is, how international this is, and the fact that this is growing as well, all goes to the urgency of this. Commissioner, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Great to speak to you.